Hi, I'm Neil from the RuneQuest Project, and welcome to Tales from the Black Alynx, a podcast series where we talk to the authors of Jonstown Compendium publications. This evening, I'm joined by two of the four-person team that is Beer with Teeth, the authors of the fantastic publications Rocks Fall, Stone and Bones, and The Dregs of Clear Wine. So without further ado, who are you and where are you?
So I'm going to talk first because I'm loudest. We're a four-person team. I'm Diana, generally known as Bera. I live in Cambridge in the UK, and I'm a really lovely person, really, and I would like that to be recorded for posterity.
Hi, I'm Dom Twist, often known as Rager. I live in the southwest tip of the UK.
And can you tell us who are the two missing members of the team tonight?
We're missing Chris, who is principally an artist but does other stuff as well, who lives in Wales, and Erin, who is over on the west coast of Canada and is also a writer for us, and also a researcher particularly.
Erin is an archaeologist and teacher, so a lot of what she has to say directly about the Bronze Age is very interesting and new to us, and she improved especially the dregs of clear wine to the point where we were able to put in, oh, this is how the real world archaeology works.
Yeah, it definitely makes an improvement to the gameplay, I think, when you've got somebody of that caliber helping along. So the other publication that I did with an old role-playing friend of mine, the Rubble Redux, he's actually an archaeologist as well. He does 3D renderings of Pompeii and ruined cities. So it definitely adds a bit of reality to it for sure.
It does add an awful lot, I think, to it, and we find an awful lot of people with an interest in archaeology or historical reenactment or historical studies tend to play RuneQuest. It does tend to sort of fit in.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be much archaeological reenactments in Dungeons and Dragons, for example.
No, although it is quite cool that you can design a dragon from scratch and have it work in real world biology. Takes a bit of doing. Erin really likes the archaeology. She actually probably has seen some of the 3D renders that your friend has done if he does it, because she shows us, ooh, this is a bone, and ooh, this is a skull with eyes put back into it. Look, you can twirl it round.
So maybe tell us a bit about your history with RPGs and how you first encountered RuneQuest or HeroQuest.
Okay, I'll probably start off there because I've got the longer history with RuneQuest and
Because
so on.
he's old.
I am. I'm really old.
I can state for the camera that is in fact true.
Yeah, I started role-playing games back in the 80s and started with D&D, quickly got fed up with it and moved off wanting something with a bit more bones to it and reality, and quickly bumped into both Traveller and Chaosm in the form of RuneQuest and Cthulhu. I didn't actually get to play much RuneQuest because I couldn't afford it because it was expensive back then. And it wasn't until later on when Games Workshop did an edition I got my hands on it, and then I was gutted to find it didn't have Gloranthan. It didn't have this incredible chewy depth world that I wanted. So it wasn't until the 90s that I actually got to run RuneQuest at a local club and things with all the bits I wanted, and I really loved it. But I didn't really get to play much more until the new edition came out, RuneQuest Gloranthan, and then an old friend, hi Tom if you're out there, decided he'd put a game together live online and introduced me to a bunch of other weirdos, one of which is on the call with us today, and that's how I met Diana Bera. And I invited an old friend of mine, Chris, who is my wife's roommate at uni, and I used to GM for her and my wife on occasion. I introduced her into the game, and Tom invited Erin in as well, and that's how we all met.
Was that something you did at school? I mean, without wanting to age you further, was that a
Yeah.
school after school thing?
Yeah. Started when I was about 11, when a friend of mine's dad bought him the basic D&D red box set, and being typical geeks, we ended up playing it. We ended up starting a role-playing club at school, and somebody bought Cthulhu and couldn't run it, and so handed it to me. So that's how I found out about Chaosm. And from the pages of White Dwarf magazine, that's where I saw Traveller and RuneQuest and these incredible worlds that I wanted to play in. These incredibly in-depth, detailed worlds that were a bit more, something to them rather than the cookie cutter. And so that's what set me on the route to RuneQuest and other games by Chaosm, and really enjoyed that.
And did you skip the RuneQuest 6 Mithras era?
Yeah, missed it entirely. I was one of the backers of Hero Wars, as it was then. My name's in one or two of the books. Put some money into it. This was before Kickstarter. And I got to say, it really didn't work for me. I didn't like it. I didn't like the narrative style. I didn't like the formats of the cheap paperback books that they came out, because it was all they could do. I mean, I'm really glad they did them, and I'm really glad that some people love them, and I'm really glad it carried on the game world. So, I'm not saying it's horrid or anything like that. It just didn't work for me, and I kind of skipped out on the whole thing. Didn't see Mithras, didn't do any of that, and it wasn't until RuneQuest Glorantha started coming back that I was re-enthused.
So for me, when I was a kid, my stepmother said, there is this awesome game called Dungeons and Dragons. And as a family, we all started playing it, and we had the most amazing DM. After we'd finished with him, he never DM'd again, but he's happy, even though he's slightly broken and sobs at night, because it was just such a marvellous campaign. So he played weekly for years, but I quickly wanted to make up my own stories as well, and someone lent me a copy of Amber Diceless role-playing game. And I'm a very happy low crunch person in general. I like the narrative style. Hero Wars has way too much crunch for me. You think you have to roll to get the effects right when someone needs a climactic moment? You're wrong. You should be able to read those people. And one of my superpowers is telling when people are unhappy so I can tread on them. That was me not being a nice person, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm a nice person. So for years and years, I was very loyal to that. I tried out other things. I've enjoyed other things, but I always returned to it. And eventually I just run so many campaigns and so much within a huge world that I was a bit burned out on it. And around that time, Tom said, hey, you should play this. And I said, no, I get obsessive about stuff. I don't have time. And he kind of twisted my arm into it. And now he's going, you are a bit obsessive about this stuff, aren't you? I was like, Tom, I told you so.
How deep did you go into the RQ2 stuff? Did you go back in time after playing RQG, or?
Well, I did start with RQG. I have looked a bit into other Hero Quest stuff and other RuneQuest stuff. And I have Borderlands and Beyond, which I'm planning to run for people. And I'm also planning to run Sun County. I like those. I can see how you get from where they were to where they are, but it's a lot better now. For one thing, you can be a female character, and you can be an Analdon or a Chalana Arroy initiate, and it actually works. It's not just planned that you're not going to be one of those people, and that widens it out a bit. And for another, the current sense of humour and just the build of the world, it's very, very hard to put into words, but I fit into that very well. And it's the little details in the books that create what the world is like. And I really appreciate how Duke Rouse fits into his world. But I like much more how Queen Laika helps build the world by the descriptions of what she's like and what her court are like. And I think that the implicit world building in RQG is basically better than anything I've found.
It's interesting to hear then, because I mean, obviously, me and Dom have come from a background of playing it when we were really quite young. So for me, it's almost like a return to source type of deal, where RQG, there's a lot of kind of foundational information within me. So it's interesting to see how you've approached RQG and how it's affected you without having that deeper history.
The way that we properly met and started doing things together, the very beginning of Beer with Teeth, was when we wrote our first game together. And later you're going to ask us what is our favourite publication, and we're going to both hold up our
Maybe.
answer.
Yeah.
But Dom was able to tell me how the world would go and what the emotional feel you should get from a scenario would be. Having that history within the group, which nobody else has been invaluable.
If you look at my game shelves, I've got all the old stuff. I've got all the old classics. I've read it all. I've got, all the fanzines and all the rest of it. I've got all of that. I admit, I sold some of my RuneQuest 2 stuff not long ago because I didn't have that emotional attachment to it, and I needed the money to buy RuneQuest Glorantha. But I have got all the RuneQuest 3 stuff and all the other, all the old publications and things like that there, and I read it and absorbed it. So I've got that gut feel for the world. But it's really good to have that new lens. They're there to experience it the new way, and also to have Erin in the background sticking in the Bronze Age realities, and Chris, besides wonderful art, is also very good at going, just a minute, aren't you doing, and she's very good at picking us up on some of the stuff that we've just assumed that maybe it's wrong or a bit out there, and she's very good at picking up stuff like that. So as a team, we work very well together, I think, and we kind of have all those different elements.
So, what made you form the four of you together as a business? Was there a particular reason, rather than just having it as more of a loose collaboration?
I kind of get blamed a lot for this. The first thing is, I've been a freelancer in art and engineering for quite a long time. So I know, for example, that it's just better to have an overarching brand that people can relate to rather than confusing people. And once I'd worked with Dom, I wanted to be able to see if it would work with other people as well. So Dom and I were talking already about beer with teeth and publishing generally under that. So because we didn't want to be representing ourselves in two different ways to Chaosium, the phrase beer with teeth for us happened very early on. But then I wanted to try self-publishing on the Jonstown compendium. So I quietly kind of crept behind the scenes a bit and went to Chris, hey, you're an artist, we've worked together before. Would you like to draw trolls or bandits or scorpion folk? And halfway through, she grabbed me by the microphone and yelled, yes. So we did something relatively simple, but with lots of really good art for her to get into practice with, which is why we have actual standees for Rock's Fall. And then that was kind of three of us together in Beer with Teeth. And we talked to Erin about it as well. And now it's like three. It's a bit complicated. Should we have an extra one? But I have a lot of spare time, which means I've always been a driving force within the four of us. I do a lot of the organisation. And so I went, you know what? I'm basically writing an extra thing with Erin anyhow. Can we invite her in as well? We're all in the same great gaming group. We know each other. We trust each other. And so Beer with Teeth grew from a brand that was essentially there so that people wouldn't get confused. If you've got two or three people together, you should have one way of referring to them. And that's pretty fundamental. And I know Rajar came up with the name Beer with Teeth as a phrase. I can't remember anymore which of us applied it first, but I'm going to blame that on him anyhow.
Yeah, it was an in-game moment when my Stormbull discovered cider and high percentage cider, and the 2 pint glasses represent my large Stormbull and Bera's small Humacti, because that's how they drink their beer. Yeah, so that's how it came about as a phrase in game. It's very much Diana's very much the driving force behind it in doing all the editing and layout and shouting at people, and then the rest of us kick in ideas when we like stuff and when projects capture our imagination and when we have enough time, energy or spoons to do it all, basically, because a lot of us are very busy or just have other stuff on, or whichever else.
Division of labour then. Obviously Chris does the art. Diana, I know you do some of the art as well. Dom and Erin just do writing? Say just.
Yeah, writing, ideas and research, as we mentioned. Erin's research goes into a lot of it. I do a bit of that myself as well.
The reason that we have Onjean the charcoal carrier is because Dom got really, really excited about the ancient world and Greece and charcoal, and this great character in Dregs grew out of him going, look, you must all read this paper.
Yeah, I found a paper on charcoal burning and its effect on the ancient Greek economy, and yeah, that set me off. So that, and I spent a lot of time kicking around various parts of the world, often mountainous, and so I'm pretty good at doing places and descriptions and having this feel for places. Spent a lot of time in the Highlands of Scotland, but also in the Himalayas and various other places. So that's where a lot of the action happens in RuneQuest in its current Dragon Pass type setting, and years of hitting people with chunks of metal.
Is that live role-playing thing, or is that something we should be watching out for on Crime Watch?
It's a historical reenactment. So as you can see, there's swords and axes in the background for those of you who are watching the camera, which is just you. But also, I've done some extra work in movies, and I was King Arthur on kids' TV and a few things like 3 or 4 times. I think Equity had me down as a stunt extra, which is to say I didn't get to say much, no speaking parts, but I did a lot well, a lot. I did a bunch of sword fights on TV and stuff like that, and so I've been into that a long time. And several other of our group are into that sort of thing as well. Chris loves
Yeah.
weapons and swords and all that sort of stuff. Diana's pretty stabby, as we mentioned, and Erin's quite a big figure in the SCA over where she is.
So this question might come to a bit of a surprise to you, but what's your favourite RuneQuest publication?
For those who cannot see at home, I'm holding up the Pegasus Plateau and pointing to my name.
Yeah, that's weirdly, that's kind of proto Beer with Teeth, because the actual first thing we wrote was Crimson Petals for the Pegasus Plateau, and that was written by me and Bera, Diana, and that's the first thing we wrote. But then we sold it to Chaosm, and so the first thing published wasn't that, and so the Beer with Teeth brand isn't out there, and we've sold a few other things, and there's more work we've been doing for Chaosm that will be coming out in the future, which is not officially Beer with Teeth, but it kind of is.
Because it's us again.
Because it's us again, yeah. And so if I was going to say what's my favourite, I'm not going to actually go with the Pegasus Plateau. I'm going to go old school because I am old school. So if you're talking Glorantha, I'm going to say Griffin Mountain. If you're talking not Glorantha, I'd say the Thieves World Sanctuary box set, because that just so grabbed me. And I spent ages poring over these maps, and at the time I didn't have access to Glorantha, so this was my sort of intro into fantasy world chaosm, and that this lovely in-depth cities that they were so good at, and the same with Griffin Mountain that drew me in. And that's kind of where the idea for Dregs came from, because it was like, those products and White Dwarf again, Aurelian, which I'm going to run very shortly, those drew me in and said, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And I dragged the rest kicking and screaming with me. And that's how Dregs happened. But so, yeah, Thieves World Sanctuary and or Griffin Mountain, depending whether you need Glorantha in that list.
I was just going to say, so Griffin Mountain, I mean, that's also one of the original campaigns we played. Obviously, we did a Pavis one, but the other, which really stuck in my mind, is our Griffin Mountain. What do you think was the appeal? Because I mean, that has got a wide ranging, a lot of people like that publication. It's one of my favorites as well.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's the big sandbox that you can just go and do what you want with, all these hooks and ties, all these lovely, I mean, I love the citadels and that. And so you can, and all these complex characters, and you can sort of, your players are off doing their thing, and you can just have them running around the sandbox. And I just love that style of play. As a GM, I just absolutely loved it. And so using those packs alongside stuff like RuneQuest Cities, and they did Cars and Tulane of the Isles, again along with Denkia Press. But and it was very much that Sanctuary and the Denkia Press, the Cars and Tulane of the Isles packs, was making like, I love those settings and having that, but I want it in RuneQuest. I love RuneQuest Glorantha as a book, but for me, that's the operating system. That's where that you run your adventures in. So I'm not going to choose a rule book as my favorite. I'm going to choose the settings and things like Griffin Mountain, where you can do these things. And I wanted to recreate something like that at the depth and level that I loved doing in Sanctuaries. Right, I'd work out who lived in every city, every single house, who the people were, who those characters were, who they interacted, and then you could drop the players into that sandbox, and it virtually wrote itself at that point. And that's very much what I wanted to do with Dregs, and that's why I love Griffin Mountain, Sanctuary, and the RuneQuest Cities books. All three of them in my mind, sure, four of them.
The answers from the others here are they're both really looking forward to the Gods book. Chris, being an artist, also really loves the art in the bestiary. I think probably, actually, I might change my mind, because I think the most useful single publication to me I use the bestiary a lot for the Monster of the Week, but I think the most important thing that there is out there is the calendar, because I can tell people it's coming up to your holy day, and I get so much out of that. So that might actually be my favourite, because that and the bestiary are my go-to plotty things. But I've got a big soft spot in my heart for Pegasus Plateau, because that's the first time I've been paid money for publishing. I need a tie break there.
I also do like the calendar. I like the panicked expression on the players when they realise that their high holy day is only 2 days away and they're stuck in the middle of the wastes.
They're in the middle of the desert. They need to cross it. Right. And we had this year. It's like, I need to get to Tawny Altar within a week. And it turns out that at Tawny Altar, there are people who really don't like me.
And can you tell us anything about the work that you're currently doing with Chaosium, or is that stumm?
We have a project that we are pitching, but we'd prefer not to mention what's going on yet. In part because people then ask us questions about it, in part because obviously we want Chaosium to say yes, and we want them to say yes in an enthusiastic manner. And we need to wait for decks to be cleared, but we're hoping to do something relatively big for them next.
There is, I think, a small thing that I can mention that's coming out in that both myself, Bera, and Erin have written some bits for the upcoming weapons and equipment book. I can mention that now because Jason and Jeff have both mentioned that on the forums, that it's up and coming, along with a bunch of other people have written bits, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in that. Having seen the contents list and seen all the topics, which I'm not going to talk about because that's for Jeff and Jason, but there's some incredible stuff in there. It's not just a splat book. There's a lot of interesting lore and material and things in there, which is coming, and that's going to be really interesting to see. My bit was fairly modest, I must say, but there's some really interesting material coming.
Yeah, that one's definitely not just a shopping list. It's why would you want to have and understand these things? So that's really cool, and I'm happy to have been part of that, but it is still in development.
That's very cool. Is that quite a release announcement? I think I must have missed that one.
Jeff mentioned it when somebody asked about what's coming up. Jeff has mentioned it, but it has not made it to the official release schedule yet. So no promises. We know policy on this. It'll be a while. I don't think the writing's finished yet either. But I know Jeff did mention that there, or possibly it was Jason actually, that there is, for example, a section on tattoos and how all that happens, which of course is really interesting stuff for Chaosm. I'm only mentioning stuff that they've mentioned in public. I'm not going to mention anything I've seen behind the scenes because who knows, might not make it to edit. I don't want to disappoint people.
So obviously you mentioned Griffin Mountain. Do you have a favourite region in Glorantha, and if you do, why?
So I think I probably like Dragon Pass most just because I have only literally been exposed to a small area of it. And for me, Sarta is the thing where I can make up new things and it's all exciting and new. But I also get that Watcher of the Skies on a new planet feeling if I look at Borderlands and Beyond or Sun County. So I think I really like those as an untouched, uncharted area that I can mess around with. But for me, it's basically whatever is newest to me and has a lot of stuff out there. And that's Sarta, where I am.
For me, I mean, I do love Sarta because I know the area so well. I remember giving somebody directions from Clearwine to Apple Lane just off the top of my head on a forum once, so I didn't have to look at a map. And it was like, you go up the valley, you go past Baxfield, you go by Asbornstead, and then you take a right, and then, I know the area very well. But my favourite area, I think, is Dagori Inkuth, is the Troll Homelands. Shout out to Troll Pack, which is also amazing. I didn't mention Troll Pack as one of my favourites because for me, as bulk of my gaming has been, well, actually now the bulk of my gaming in Glorantha has been with RuneQuest Glorantha because we played so much in the last since it came out. But before that, it was Sarta and RuneQuest 3, and so the Troll books were split into 3 packs, so I couldn't pick one. But no, the aliens who aren't just humans in skin suits nature of trolls, done right, was brilliant, and I love that difference and otherness. And one of my favourite gaming experiences this time round was introducing Bera and all the newbies to Dagori Inkuth and Crabtown, and having them go there. They were on a detective mission to find White Eye, who had retired to Crabtown now, and so they had this thing, and he had this item that somebody needed, and so they did this whole diplomacy thing, and I got to run all the classic old troll stuff, and have drinking contests and make people drink Powsy and all that sort of stuff. And it was great fun doing all that cultural anthropology stuff to a bunch of people who had never seen it before. So that was great fun. So I love Dagori Inkuth and Crabtown, and that area is great fun.
Was that before or after the troll scenario?
I think we did Roxfall first, I think. But definitely having trolls as kind of part of my head. And as he says, the alien not in a human skin suit makes me really happy. I love trolls as a concept. So it could have been in the other order, but definitely that was a bit of an inspiration for me for Vinger's Ford. If you want to play it that way, you can absolutely, definitely have the trolls be the good guys. Like if you have a troll-heavy party, you can help out the trolls, and that's absolutely fine.
Definitely one of the benefits of RuneQuest itself is that it's not just, monsters filled with experience points. They're
No,
living
yeah.
races that actually that you can interact with and play with.
I remember a review from many, many years ago, and this I think was one of the things that made RuneQuest one of the games I wanted. When I wanted out of D&D and I wanted something with substance, was somebody saying, RuneQuest was a game where you could encounter a dark troll village, and instead of burning it down and counting the experience points, get converted to their religion and be sent back to as missionaries to humanity. And that's and there was me going, yeah, I want some of that, and I want to understand what all this stuff in White Dwarf is about, initiates of this and cultists of that, and I want to know what it all means because it's fantastic, and I want to run it. So yeah.
Yeah, in Microrantha, mistress trolls are ranked by whether they've ever seen the sun. So you know that someone is really high level when you meet somebody who says, "Never have my eyes touch light, never has my skin touched light." And there's one who is eyeless because her eyes touch light, so she pulled them out. And this is perfectly well understood by the trolls.
And ate them, no doubt.
Probably offered them, but might have eaten them because then you can destroy it. Maybe that's how she offered them.
Love it. So from gaming in RuneQuest, then what made you take the leap into actually writing for the Jonstown Compendium?
I think what it was is Diana asked, we were having a thing where our main GM of the original game of RuneQuest, which still continues, that we're playing, that our friend runs, he was suffering a bit of burnout. He's got a very busy job. And so he was getting to the point where he needed, and he's always wanted, to have other people come in and guest GM and do sort of a troop ensemble and, have people take over and he could play characters. He's always wanted that. It's always been his ideal. So I've run a few things, and Bera said, I'd like to run something, but I'm not too sure about running such a crunchy system, having mostly been an Amber. So Dom, can you help me with the world, and we'll sort of get it ready, and then we'll both run it together. I think I took the lead in running it. Bera was there in the background.
So this is about session 15, 16. It was actually pre-COVID. It was a few years ago. It was just, we wanted to do this. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to GM it at that point with any smoothness. And
is this an in-person session as well, or were you playing remotely at this stage?
We've always played remotely.
Yeah, we've always played remotely. Some of our characters, some of our players are in the north of England, some in the very south, some are in Wales, one's in Finland, one's in Canada. We've always been online. So so we sat down and we got it all ready to go. And because Bera wanted to be really, really on top of it, we wrote it up in quite a lot of detail. And then I suspect, although she hasn't admitted to me so far, there was always at the back of her mind that she wanted to publish. And then I'll hand it over to Diana to explain the rest.
Yeah, pretty much. By that point, it was, I hadn't deliberately not blocked it from being something that we could publish. So, I'd set everything out, A, so that Dom could read it really well while he was running it, and B, so that I could write really good notes on it. And then once we had those, that had kind of got me over my initial hesitancy, and I reckoned that I could fully write it up. So I did a lot of the editing work, but with Dom doing, more ideas and how things had worked and why he played it that way in particular. And then we pitched that to Chaosium. And that's how I actually started writing, which is a really weird way for, I don't think anyone else came into the JC in the same way. But after that, we had, we knew we could do it. It was just a question of what and when.
And was this before the JC that you pitched to Chaosium?
Yep. Okay. It was probably at least a year before publication, but we could actually find out the date on it because it is all neatly logged, and it's about 2 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah, and we just got really lucky because Jason was putting together what became Pegasus Plateau, and I'm told he had somebody drop out, so they were short one adventure, and our adventure was almost exactly the same length.
Yeah, our adventure just came onto his desk at a really opportune time.
And he just said, "Yep, there we go. That solves me a problem. Done." And there we go. And
are you able to tell us what level the squealing was at once that you got the email through that you were going to be published?
If you didn't actually hear it, it was because you were asleep in Australia.
There was such a fanboy moment, I've got to say. Getting my first RPG published thing by by this company of all people, and it was like who have been consistently my favorite games company forever, and it's just like yeah, I was very, very happy.
I've got screenshots on my phone which I still occasionally look at.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And then from there, then obviously publishing in the Jonstown Compendium. Can you tell us a bit about the publications that you've got up there so far?
Now, at this point, this is complicated enough that I need to get up a spreadsheet.
Spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's pretty complex.
There's my sales spreadsheet. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I need to scroll. We've got quite a few publications, in part because I have a lot of free time, and in part because I've done a few things with other people. So the first thing we published was Rock's Fall, which is an art experimentation with Chris to find out basically did she want to be our main artist. And then after that, we liked it so much, we went on pretty much immediately to Stone and Bone together. But we're still hoping to make that the first part of a trilogy. We have ideas, we need to find the time, and I know Chris is very keen to get on with that. Then COVID hit, so we released Colour Your Own Trollkin, which is free, in perpetuity, forever. We just want to make you happy. And we also added to Rock's Fall, Troll's Fall. If you want to play the troll side of things, we have all the motivations for you. So that's a completely free extra scenario to celebrate us getting up to silver. It has improved and expanded art, and it tells you what Relga wants out of life, just mostly to eat people.
Can I just say that I think that's probably one of my favorite things about the JC is that the fact that you can put out a publication and then just keep building on top of it as the interest actually comes through. It's quite dynamic.
And we like that. We knew that Troll's Fall was relatively small, but we knew it was art heavy and beautiful. So we didn't want to underprice it, but once it had started being popular, we were very happy to expand it. So we feel the expansion gives you more than merely words. I've now got to go on, like, eat your packed lunch and we'll keep going. After that, I was partway through writing Vinger's Ford when Matthew Pookie approached me with a manuscript for Jordan's Rescue Redux and all of the permissions that he needed to make it. And I'd never actually worked with a classic before, so it's not officially a beer with teeth thing, but I did the layout for that, and I'm very proud to be associated with it as the layout artist. I also volunteered a bit of the art and the finding art time and got Chris on board to do the cover.
That was quite an interesting one, going back to the old classic. I dug out my old classic White Dwarfs and got the name of the original artist, and then Bear tracked him down and gave permission to use the original art just as a representation in the back for the cover of White Dwarf, which had nothing to do with it.
That was really cool. It's like, hey, this is this thing. And so because of him, and thanks to him, we have the Ghoul coming out, which is actually a bit of Cthulhu art, but it's just from that particular issue we've got that particular bit of art. So
is it the one? It's like got a bit of like a tombstone with the thing coming out of it. Is that right?
Yeah. And it featured in the Games Workshop edition of Cthulhu that came out at that time, and was also on the cover of White Dwarf, because they recycle art a lot, and it's actually been on the cover of a few novels and stuff as well, because the artist sold it onto other things. But yeah, it's a classic bit of fantasy art of the period.
It never ceases to amaze me. I mean, I was probably between 13 and 14 when all those White Dwarfs come out, and you can't remember them, but when you see one of those old covers, bang, you're transported completely back. And the amount of time you spend staring at those covers, it's deep in your brain. You just need the trigger to remember it. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. I've got them all still, all my old collection, which is pretty good. It wasn't complete, but it's pretty good. In the next room, and I actually am running stuff from them again still now, which is great fun.
I think old RuneQuest stuff especially, and figures and dice, for me, go the same way as the occasional sock. So I've no idea where a lot of my collection has gone. Box sets of RuneQuest figures, dice. Somebody's got them somewhere. I don't know who. And then from Vinger's Ford, then what was the next project?
Yeah, so after Jorthan's Rescue Redux, there was Fingers Forward, and that was
Yep.
one that I did alone. No one else really had time at that point, but I think that was around the time of lockdown, quite early on still. And I had a load of time and I wanted to be learning computer art properly because I'm a traditional artist, but I wanted to be creating digital art pieces. So my first proper digital art piece is the cover of Fingers Forward. Like that's the first one I was really happy to actually sit out as a cover. I know it has a few problems, but it works. But then after Fingers Forward, we all kind of looked at each other. And I've been co-writing something with Erin in the background. She's very much part of the team. But we've been chewing over, should we do something? Because there's Rajar over there, there's Dom getting really excited about Griffin Mountain and going, we should map Clearwine.
I really, really, really wanted. Yeah, it comes back to what I was saying before. I wanted to do the city books, and it was something that Jeff said. It's something that Jeff said. He was talking about Jonstown, I think it was, and he said, somebody said, "Oh, I've written all this stuff and I've gone to this detail," and he said, "Oh, we're going to do Jonstown, but we're not going to go to that house-to-house detail level." And part of something inside me went, "Oh, I really wanted that," and I thought, "Well, let's do it." And Jeff actually was very supportive of the idea and said, yes, that's exactly what we want Jonstown to do. We want people to pick up that level of detail that we will never be able to do. And so that was like, yes, let's do this. And everybody else looked at me like I was a bit mad.
Actually, I looked at him like I didn't understand how much work was going to be involved, and that I said yes.
Every house and every person.
Yeah.
If there were call for it, we'd do that. But I reckon that if we could get away with it, I want to do at least one city block set. Like Dregs is one block set. There are other minor bits of the slums we probably don't need to do. But if we did at least one block set for every class or every set of guilds or whatever, that would really chuff me.
Yeah, I'd like us to do pretty much the whole of Clearwine, and not to every person because that doesn't give GMs room to do their own thing. But I'd like to do that. But I'd also like to do every other town in Sartar and every other town and everything else. And the time is not infinite. But yeah, I really wanted to do it.
Other than picking out a favourite child, do you have one that you're particularly fond of that catalogue?
Well, after Dregs, there is still one more to mention. Dom had stepped in at the last minute to create what was originally called the Box. We had Varanis, Erin, who was relatively new to our team at that point, and relatively new to, sorry, not even in the team, relatively new to the game. And she'd gone completely all in with a plot hook. So, Dom, do you want to explain that one?
Yeah, it was a real last minute deal, and I'm going to give out a shout out to my friends at Trinity Knot Studios, and I'll explain why in a minute. Last minute, our regular GM just couldn't run anything. He just, had a shocking day. I got nothing in the tank. I've got no plot, guys. Can somebody run something? And so my friends of mine at Trinity Knot Studios do a GM's tarot deck, which is just basically you draw 3 cards, and it has your overlying plot, your theme, and any hooks or twists. And I just drew 3 cards, and I ran like 10 minutes before the game began, and I ran the game from that. And I think the cards were the box, and you really want to know what's in the box. Confused elderly people, and you are being watched, I think, with the cards. And it was like, okay. And I just made up a diversion along the road, and yeah, Erin Varanis went all in on knowing what's in the box, and we ended up with characters mud wrestling in front of the box, trying to get it off each other, and it came to blows as the elves and elders arrived. There was a scuffle going on between the players, and the whole thing was just glorious. And so I thought, you know what? And I think that was one of the first times I'd stepped into GM way back when. And I thought, you know what? I'll write that up and let's do that. And Bera there wanted to do some really interesting things with some of the internal art, which I thought was really interesting. I wanted to run it as a one-off, and so we set out, wrote that up, and I ran it as the second playtest because we'd had this once in the distant past at Glorantha Games, again Pookie's and friends thing. And I ran it as a playtest at Glorantha Games, and I credit the guys there who played in it as playtesters as well, and they added a bit more detail and a few more twists to it. And that's how we came up with Woodcraft.
Yeah, so as he said, so then they put another spanner in.
Yeah.
So do I have a favourite? It's actually hard to tell. I have favourite bits within each one, like the troll Vingan encounter itself in Vingan's Fall, or the fact that Devaval wears human armour and is a bit upset sometimes that people of human size don't wear duck-shaped armour. And that's like a little bit unfair. And what I really like is a lot of the small details. So it's hard for me to say I have a favourite. You know, Dregs is just damned awesome. I'd bury me with one of those. But even within that, I got like there are bits that I love much more.
Yeah, I'd say the same. Obviously, because Dregs was my brainchild, even though it got ripped apart and put back together again by everybody else, and my actual input and content was mostly to do with characters and stuff, and the original "Let's do this" and madness and doing sketch maps. But actually, most of the content wasn't me in the end. But yeah, I'd say Dregs is my favourite.
So I've heard a lot of people say that they pass on once a publication is done, they put it aside, and then their next favorite thing is the thing they're working on currently. Is that the case with you, or?
Generally, I hate what I'm working on. I loathe it. It's an albatross around my neck. It's horrific. I enjoy getting to the end stages of it. When I stop hating an artwork in general, that means it's getting good. But I have to fight my way through absolutely everything I do. So my favourite one is generally the one I've just released, or Dregs.
Yeah. For me, yeah, obviously I love Dregs. I'm not having just done Woodcraft. I'm sort of in the run up. There's another thing I ran for after a little while. We split the two groups because it became too big, our role playing group. So we split it into two, and I'm the primary GM of one of them. There's something that I ran loosely as a follow-up, Defending Apple Lane, but it ties in a lot of area there, which I'm quite interested to do. And I know Chris wants to do some of the art for that. So I'm quite interested of doing that. But yeah, Dregs remains my favourite for the moment, at least until I've gone through. And I do go through the lack of motivation partway through the project, just like Brad has said. So yeah, at the moment, I'm still think that's a good idea, but we'll see how far we get when I get into writing it up from my notes.
You mentioned that part of the process was the rest of the team pulling what you've written apart and then putting it back together again. Is that a common part of the process? Is that something that has worked out as to be something that happens regularly?
Yeah, absolutely. That happens a lot. Generally, one of us will come up with the key idea, and it's normally me or Diana, but not exclusively. And then the other one, we rip it apart, both us and the other members. Erin's very good at providing this detail and background and some characters and things like that, and Chris is very good at providing rakes that we step on. And saying, "Oh, have you thought about this?" And we go, "No," and then we argue with her for a bit, and then we can see she's right, and then we have to go rewrite a bunch of stuff, and that happens quite a bit. So yeah, there's definitely a ripping it all apart and putting it back together again, and I think that's one of the advantages of a team. It's also a disadvantage because it can take a while, but I think it's one of the advantages of the team is that we aren't focused on one idea, one person's brain, and we've seen this with some of the other. And this is nowhere criticism or anything else out there, but you do sort of send stuff out there, and if you're the only person who's had eyes on before it publishes, you can suddenly go, "Oh, I didn't think about that."
Well, you're almost playtesting it as you're writing it in a group, really.
Yeah. We always do playtest it in group. Yeah.
Generally, we run a thing within one or two of the groups. Like I run my own 1.5 days a week. Sorry, wrong. 1.5 times a week. I run a game. So Vinger's Ford happened because a friend said, and I am now going to reveal this to Rajar. So Darlant's character, Darlant's player, I love him very much. And usually he says something and I attempt to make it into the plot. And this one was, the real adventure is the friends you make along the way. And it just sets things off in my head. And I take it as a challenge to try and make something from whatever Tristan has said. So hail to you, Blythe Darlanth. But for me, the process is a bit different because I have all that spare time that other people don't have, but also I'm the only person who has yet been doing the layout and the writing, and I'm often the editorial voice. So that means that I do a lot of my editing actually in the layout document, whereas everyone else does their editing with each other because they have to pass it through me anyhow. Quite often I'll have something almost finished and then I'll pass it out to someone else to read. But we all know kind of what happened, and I have the ability to put in, oh, if that happens, do A, if this happens, do B. So I have a tendency to over rely on myself because I can do the art and I can do the writing. So if we need art in there, I often assign it to me. And if we need writing in there, well, why shouldn't I assign it to me? I'm there. And then we need the editing, and I'm the last voice anyhow. For me, it's actually rather different because for Dregs, absolutely true what Rajar said. We went in there, we each had a thing that we were doing, we critiqued each other's work. But when I'm doing something alone, or if I'm doing something with Chris, she does very good rakes, but I tend to do a lot of the final writing again. For me, the process is put it down, bang it into shape in words and art at the same time, and then return it to other people to look at. And in fact, that is a weakness of mine. I could ask for a lot more help with the writing. It's just that either I can be doing the writing or I can be doing the project management, and I know which of those I actually prefer. So I tend to gallop ahead more and then get feedback afterwards, but I always make sure there are rounds of feedback.
Yeah, it's super important. I think that's one of the things that I regret not doing more, is working in a group, because you do. I feel that the writing tends to take longer. You tend to go down paths which, if you're working with somebody else, they can steer you off before you've gone too far down them, and you have to write yourself back out of a hole, as it were. So on that, then, are there any elements of the publications that you still struggle with within a group? And if so, how do you overcome them, assuming that you have?
I think we're pretty well oiled now. I mean, when we have something to do, it basically, as long as we all have some time, probably the most difficult thing is project management. I know sometimes Chris has a problem here. She's almost the opposite of us in that she takes a lot of the art briefs, creates them, and then comes back for the feedback. And she does actually, she said, get art blocks sometimes. And that's really horrible. And she had it on Dregs. Do you remember that, Rajar?
Yeah, it was very interesting. We were trying to do the cover of Dregs, and Chris could just not picture what we were trying to describe, and it just wasn't working for her. We spent quite a lot of time into it, and then I think the breakthrough came when we said, you know what, let's just do the NPC sketches. We've described all these NPCs. Can you just start doing some art from them, and we'll use something out of that to be the cover? And then the dam burst, and we couldn't keep up with the sketches that kept arriving on the Discord channel. And there were these fantastic character arts just appearing, like it seemed like every 10 minutes. It was like, here's another genius piece of work, and it was like, damn it. And it just kept coming.
Yeah, 2 or 3 times a day would find out what somebody looked like. And the original cover came in really quite early, the cover sketch, because once she was going, oh, we only want a vignette, it just took the pressure off her. And she didn't, we were saying, don't bother with the finished cover. We can take that away if necessary. Don't stress yourself, just doodle. And she went, you know what? There's this picture of Diogenes in his barrel. And it turned out completely awesome. So
Yeah.
she struggles. We probably all struggle with being blocked in our writing a bit, but she needs an inspiration. She describes herself as an alien wildebeest, and sometimes I do translation for her from human to alien wildebeest. It's like, what does this client want? So I can tell her, oh yeah, that actual detail that you think you're hung up on, the client hasn't noticed that. She has different struggles. I think that mostly Erin's struggles with being very busy and wanting to finish things perfectly.
Erin is very much a perfectionist and wants to do all this wonderful stuff and doesn't have the time, really doesn't. So that's certainly an issue. And for me, it's really weird because I'm used to being a GM and being very creative and being able to spool out loads and loads and loads of stuff. but that just hasn't been the case in the last few years. And so I have to think about things quite a lot. I spend a lot of time sort of wandering around the woods and riverbank thinking about characters and things, and before I eventually produce something, which I know could be frustrating for my co-writers, but that's how it's turned out for me.
And did lockdown get your juices flowing in terms of creativity, or did it get somewhat stifled?
And for me, oddly, it got quite stifled to start with initially, and I think that was to do with sort of stress and the sort of the whole zeitgeist thing going on of like wow, I was kind of expecting an apocalypse. I was expecting more zombies. I could use my axe, but no, it was sort of wow. And then it's taken a while. I think now as we still go on because we're still struggling with it. We've just gone into another lockdown in parts of the UK at least. Chris just came out. The rest of us just went in, and I've certainly got more ideas this time round. So yeah, now having adjusted, but yeah, it's been interesting.
I'm naturally pretty introverted, so for me the problem was being locked in a house with other people. I've had a few bad times, but for the main part, I'm very fortunate to be able to go to my job now. So I work in a loft. There's one other person there. He's my boss. We shout at each other from a long distance away, which is how we've always communicated. And that's really cool. So that does give me a break. But when we were really solidly locked down the first time, that was when I just threw myself into learning digital art for a while. So that didn't directly produce anything, but it did lead to Fingers Forward and to me being able to do the art for the box for the Tale of Woodcraft, because I developed those skills during that time. But I know I lost other skills. I'm basically feral right now, and I do try to bite the postman.
We believe her.
Yeah, it was lockdown was certainly an interesting time, especially when you had a publication written which revolved around disease-driven creatures. That was an interesting choice.
I do recall you
Yeah.
saying, "Should I publish this now?" It's like, what
Yeah.
do you do? You put in all that work.
Yeah, it's like, damn it, trolls are a lot cleaner.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've asked this question to all of the people that have published on the JC, and it's been overwhelmingly positive. And I don't expect it to be any different for you guys. But have you been happy with the sales?
Yes, I'm a natural pessimist, so I went in. I have the sales figures in front of me. I'm a natural pessimist, so I went in kind of going, if we get to silver, that will be good. If we have, one sale a week for a year, that's what we're going to be happy with. And we actually agreed with Chris. So I agreed with Chris what would be appropriate, what would be not unhappy with as our base. And then Rock's Fall just blew past that completely. And in fact, as Chris points out, they're still selling. So especially at the beginning of the month, you get a little uptick in sales. Someone new comes along, they have money, and they buy the beer with teeth work. So she's very happy with them as well. I know she feels it's been an appropriate use of her artistic time. I think we're all pretty well chuffed.
Yeah, we definitely are, and I know Erin is very happy because although she is a professional academic and has a lot of publications, this is the first one she's been paid for because that's not how academia works. So no, and myself, yeah, totally. Between that and being paid by by Chaosm themselves, it's I never thought I'd earn money from gaming. It just it never occurred to me in my wildest dreams that I would earn money. Okay, it's not going to give up the day job. Not that I have one at the moment. Thank you, COVID. But that's I've got a job interview later. Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? Didn't expect it, but the figures have been great. And looking at Jonstown itself, I really am amazed at the quality of the work and the amount of the work. I mean, and look how we do on the overall sales figures. Drive through. The community content, Jonstown's where it's at. It's really pushing.
Smashing it.
Yeah, it's smashing it. And the quality of the content, I think, there's been that one publication that should remain nameless that got pulled because they hadn't asked for permission for a bunch of stuff, and it's not on there anymore. It's gone. But other than that, you look at it, it's really good stuff there. When we were putting Dregs together, I thought this is amazing. And then you look at what else is out there, and you think, good God, it's all great.
It does make you think, how the hell have other people got the time to put in, the time that they've done it must have been working on it for years, surely. Either that or
there's some serious amount of love and passion that gone into these, which has sometimes led to, in the Jonstown forum, there's often been quite a few sort of ding dongs between creators, but it's all from love,
Yeah.
and it's all about making the best works we can. And there's been some incredible stuff out there I really like. So yeah,
Well,
good
it's
stuff.
testament to Greg's world building abilities, I think, that
Yeah.
that it has still, what are we talking now? 40 more years on, people are still, writing for the world, and also what the others have done in terms of the golden age of RQG now. It's really kind of
Yeah,
restoked it.
yeah, it really has. It really has, and it couldn't come at a better time with all this lockdown, with people doing it online. And I feel for those people that just don't adapt to playing online and don't enjoy it. But for those that have, I mean, my gaming's gone up through the roof, and it's one of the things that's really helped. Although I've got a nice space to wander around in. Yeah, the number and quality of content out there is amazing. It's really good.
Yeah, I like the fact that Dregs looks like it competes with the best, like that we hit that bar and there are other things out there. And I think that the community responds to that, and the sales come because they're worth it and they come for everyone, which is good.
And going back to what you were saying earlier, I think Greg's genius was allowing internal conflict. Not everything had to be consistent, and you could have lots of different viewpoints, because I think that's genius. You go and look at some of the other big established role-playing worlds, they either didn't allow people that creativity, Gygax and co just didn't let people have that thing unless they were incredibly trusted. But I think Greg's genius is, you can have one worldview which is this way and it's all completely true, and then you can have somebody else's view which is diametrically opposed to that, and that's also true. And I think by having that, it doesn't matter if individual voices differ slightly, because that's just their perspective.
It's not even just a perspective, it's then an additional thing, and it's better. As soon as you set out, your Glorantha will vary, and this is the mythological reason why. You set up this point where you can have a really healthy ecosystem of the whole tribe going, I have this idea, and Greg going, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think it's real genius in that. And allowing them, because I've been involved in writing for other worlds and things, nothing that saw publication. Somebody did once pay me for it, never got published. Ooh, that burned. But yeah, having that creativity and being able to do that, and so if your game will vary slightly, so what? But grandfather monkey taught us all magic. Nobody else knows this, but it's still true.
It's an interesting balance of giving you the framework of the world for you to play in, but then also having it to be free enough that you can still do whatever you want in the world and it still feel grounded in that setting. Whereas with something like D&D, I only played it for a while, but it was almost that kind of flatline, very, homogenous. There didn't seem to be any spark or life in it, whereas RuneQuest is an explosion.
Absolutely.
One of the reasons I really loved my original first D&D campaign was the amounts that my GM had read, some of which I'd read as well. There we were, third level characters wandering through this place, and we reached somewhere on the sea, and it's called Innsmouth. And he was capable of shoving that in, and that really was what made it. It was all the additions rather than understanding the D&D world.
Yeah, and for me, that's where Glorantha triumphs, because you can get all these wonderful things that people do in their D&D or whatever else games, but then they either have to publish it as a separate game world, or it just gets
not
lost.
cohesive.
It's not cohesive. So you have something like the wonderful Aurelian thing that was in White Dwarf back in the day, this wonderful, gorgeous city. The rest of that author's campaign world is lost. It's sat in his attic somewhere and has never seen the light of day or publication, and never will, probably, because he's got bats in eyes. So it's never going to happen, and it's never going to get adopted. But if you did something that good in Glorantha, you got every chance of back in the day of getting accepted as official, although the bar was a bit higher. But now you stick it on Jonstown.
Sandheart is on the map now.
And exactly.
So it went, a high quality thing went into the Jonstown compendium, and now it's on the map of Sun County.
Yeah, and that just could not happen easily in D&D. I mean, they had efforts at trying to do it, but they were sort of pushing against the current the whole way to make it happen, and it kind of broke down. Whereas Glorantha, it was baked in from the beginning, and that makes it such a wonderful setting to write for.
So you've had the sales that you're really happy with. Have there been any special responses from fans and customers, for want of a better word, that have interacted with your material that you've really kind of taken to heart?
Yeah, right early on, when Rocks Fall was one of the first things, people gave battle reports, and that was really damn cool. But the best things I'm finding now is someone will say something like, "Oh, I did this thing with Fingers Ford," and or like, "Oh, I'm going to be playing this."
Mm.
But it's really awesome that you've got this clan structure, so I know who the NPCs are. So quite often they interact with the world building. Occasionally they just offer critiques. So I don't know if Dom's had this. I'm loud as the publishing voice as well. So sometimes you'll find someone come up to you on Facebook and say, "Look, I have these ideas. What do you want?" Write it all down.
Yeah, I've had a bit of that, not as much as yourself, because you tend to be more the face of things. But yeah, I get a bit. I tend to hang out more on the BRP forum as well, so I tend to get more of it there. But I haven't been there lately, it must be said.
Yeah, and in general, it's been good. Right, we get some massively good reviews. I treasure the one from Hervé, which is like, "This is an absolutely wonderful, amazing, beautiful book. 4 stars." It's like, man, the logic that went into that. I love it more than I love most of the 5-star reviews.
Yeah, that's a cheeky one. And for those people that are thinking about writing for the Jonstown Compendium, that have got half a manuscript and they're thinking of actually publishing, would you have any advice for those people?
I'd say, first of all, do it. Absolutely do it. Get if you're going to think about, or you think you've got something that might get to print on demand level, which now, of course, has to be Electrum. You want to do that from the start, otherwise you'll cry more. And I didn't do the layout. I heard Bera crying a lot.
There were tears at 2 a.m.
I would also say, if it is your child of love, if you're a love project, then really get it play tested, get feedback, get other authors in as soon as you can to get that additional thing. It'll hurt, but it'll hurt less than publishing it without it, and then finding out all the things that you maybe could have improved. So I do that, but absolutely do it. Absolutely do it.
Yeah, so I'd say definitely get play tested and get edited. For me personally, I would say start small, because my experience was that I did editing and layout at the same time as I was writing the first thing with Chris. So for me, it was important to do Rocks Full to develop the skills that went into the later, more complicated things. Other people may not have that experience. If you have a writing partner or a layout partner who knows how to do this, then you've got much more of an advantage. So also, the Jonstown Community Creators Circle has a lot of people who genuinely want to help you and want you to succeed. And you can ask for help. And the strongest thing we've got going isn't actually our ideas, it's the community that you've got around you. So if you have half a manuscript, A, make it into a manuscript, and B, ask for help during that process and during the next upcoming bits where you've got to make it into a book. So rely on your community and kick yourself up the backside.
I'd add 2 other things is don't underestimate how much work it is. When Dregs is the biggest thing we've done, and I deliberately chose quite a small area to do, and it took us a lot of work to get that done. So it's a lot of work. And second thing is, if you're purely a writer and you don't do layout and you don't do art, do not underestimate the amount of effort that goes into layout and into producing art, because you quite often see, not necessarily on Jonstown, but generally writers going, "Oh, can you just knock some art out for me, mate?" And it's like, it's not like that. It really isn't. And then when you start getting into how much effort the layout and the art takes, that really was an eye opener for me. And because the first thing I did was just, it went off to Chaosim and they did all that stuff, and it just happened, and then when you actually start doing it yourself, it's like, okay, so when people start getting impatient for the next book coming, I now completely understand the pain and effort of, what do you mean you had it all written, you're just doing layout and art, why is it so late? No, you don't.
Well, and especially to the quality that they're producing stuff now as well. And I should say as well, within the Jonstown Compendium, I think writing is great, but if the format that it's being produced in and presented in is not to the highest standard it can be, it does have an impact on the way that people interact with the content. So
Oh,
for
yeah,
anybody out
totally.
there, I think it's definitely worthwhile. You know, even the great templates that are out there that are created by Rick at Chaosium are a great starting point. But even if it's just to get somebody to go through and have a bit of a critical eye, as they may do with writing, to do the same with layout.
Yeah, so there's one other thing I'd say if you're going to be making your own thing. With Fingers Forward, I actually went outside Beer with Teeth because I knew everyone would go, yeah, we'll do this editing for you. And I wasn't sure how the breakdown of money would go there because I was a bit worried that they'd basically just be doing it for free because it was so nearly finished and they know how much the work is and labour's worth money, but that was actually a little bit awkward. So I went to someone else, Achelas Austin Conrad, and he's got a small cut in it, but he actually provided a complete outside editing structure for me. Finding people who have a skill set that you can rely on, and not that I can't rely on Beer with Teeth, they'd just be too nice about it, is a very important part of publishing. Like, give up 5, 10, 15% to an editor, give up some to a layout artist, make sure that they do it right. And that's what royalties are for. It's like, we know we're not going to get rich out of this.
Mhm.
Don't try and keep all of the effort and all of the money for yourself. You'll do better with other people.
And in writing some of the publication that you've put out so far, did you have any input from the Chaosium staff? And if so, how was that?
There have been a couple of small things. First of all, you can ping someone on Facebook or ask on Facebook, what's this thing? And sometimes you get a detailed reply because, Jeff decides to splurt 300 words onto the page. But also, Erin at that point was talking to Jeff about a bit of work that she was doing for Chaosium. So we finished a lot of stuff, we thought, and then we got this boot. Actually, just tweak that bit in there and talk about the upcoming SATA book. So I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say of what actually happened, but we did get direction for what we shouldn't do. So we took out a few things. With dregs in particular, we were trying very hard to keep it as close to canon as possible, so that you can just pick it up and use it and know absolutely that it works with other things. So A, we kept as much to RuneQuest Glorantha as possible, and B, there was some input, and I can't actually say how much because Erin was the one who said, look, this bit's got to go, but we can put that bit in instead. So I think there's mention of rune spells in there, which aren't actually published yet, but when they do get published, they'll mesh with what we've written. So, it just so happens that we know who Sata the Builder is and who Gustbran is in this particular rune quest, but we didn't get particularly dictated to.
No, they've been very good about that.
And obviously the feedback from what they've read of your publication so far has been really positive.
Yeah, very, very much so. We've had no negative feedback at all from them. I presume if they've got any, they kept it to themselves.
We didn't get any behind the scenes feedback or anything like that, certainly. Anything would have been in public.
So if you had unlimited time and budget, would there be a particular project that you'd like to undertake next?
I've already mentioned this in way. I'd love to finish doing, if not all of Clearwine, then a chunk of it, and I'd like to do the same for other towns and cities, maybe further afield than Sarta. I'd love to do that. I really love some of the big sprawling Chaosium campaigns, be it for Cthulhu or Pendragon, and I know Jeff's doing one of those at the moment. And I know there's another one coming from Pendragon that's been worked on by another friend at Chaosium. But I'd love to do something like that as well, and potentially going back again to Aurelian. I'd love to finish doing Clearwine and maybe some of the other towns and cities, and then do a big sprawling adventure that ran through those areas and tied it all together and did that. But that's a big project, so I doubt it'll ever happen. But we never know. Maybe it will.
Maybe earmark that one for the next lockdown.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that Chris wants to go crazy with Brew at some point. She said that. It's like she wants to get really deeply into the things that she can draw that are interesting. Beer with Teeth have a few projects lined up she's excited about. She wants to work on Stone and Bone and flesh out more characters for different parts of Clearwine or for more source books. I know Erin is happy. Erin wants to do dregs. She wants to do the Weaver's Quarter.
Yeah.
Spoiler that for you, that might be the next thing we do. But we spent about an hour working out new possible titles, and although we had to stamp on some brutally, there's some things that we reckon we can do that we all want to do. For me personally, if I had unlimited time and budget, I would put down the Jonstown Compendium and rebuild my art machine from scratch. I'm a traditional artist, I'm an engineer, I've made a machine that does art for me, but it doesn't yet do lino cutting, and it doesn't yet do oil painting or watercolour. So that's what I'd like to do. If you forced me to go to the Glorantha world, I'd probably want to make a 1 in 10 model of the Boltholme Palace and paint it. I mean, if you're going to say time and budget allowed, screw that, we shall type some things. I would, right in the middle of Cambridge, build a 1 in 10. And actually, I've got to do it on Castle Hill. It's the only hill we've got. Like, huge, great big version of Jonstown Palace or of the Boltholme Palace. If you force me to say that it's got to be on the Jonstown Compendium, well, at that point, I probably want to finish off a load more Clearwine stuff. I've got the problem is I have so many ideas, and if I had unlimited time and budget, I would commit fraud so I could do all of them. Well, why are you asking me to only do one? And I know Raygel's actually with me there. He's just quieter about fraud when recording.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, all of us are looking, hopefully, towards various projects we've got on the boil, and then expanding Clearwine. And that's all of us need to be together and have free time for that. But we're eager to do it when we can.
What's the process then for deciding what you do next? Is it just get in a room, shirts off, all have a fight, or is it a bit more democratic than that?
That covers it, actually.
Yeah, pretty much that covers it. It's about levels of enthusiasm. So it's what do we want to do next? What's the energy there for what to do? Because we know it takes so much time and energy to do these things. So what's got the enthusiasm? And and if a project only catches 1 or 2 people's imagination, then they may go and do it, and other people may just like snipe from the sidelines. Or it may be that we all come up with this idea, and we really wanted to do dregs after I beat people up enough. So then we might do something like that. So it's a mixture. It's how much energy have we got to do something?
It's a bit awkward right now because I started being the layout person and the editing person. Beer with Teeth has a particular editorial voice, and it's mine. Plus, I'm currently the only person skilled with layout. This is actually going to change when Erin has more time after the end of the academic year. I'm going to be teaching her that. When Chris has more spoons and isn't doing art, I'm going to be teaching her that as well. So that should loosen things up. But quite often we fall prey to the fact.
More spoons?
Spoons is a measure that it's used in energy. You only have so many teaspoons of energy left in any one day. So it takes X spoons to get out of bed, X spoons to have a shower, and it's sort of it's a mental health type of thing that it originally came from. But we find it very helpful to describe how much energy you've got left.
So someone said to their friend, what is it actually like? And their friend was looking around for something and grabbed 6 spoons and says, this is your ration of energy for the day. What are you going to do? You need to get out of bed. So she said, took one, said, okay, I'm going to get up. And then her friend took more and said, you're going to get dressed and you're going to have a shower. And then there were 3 spoons left and 3 spoons gone. And all she'd done was got up. At that point, her friend understood just what the problem was, where she hadn't, despite being a good friend and loving each other, she hadn't understood. And she just looked and went, oh. And spoons since then has become also about mental health. It's like, how much bandwidth do you have? But it is literally your ration of ability to do things.
So, for example, when Erin's in full teaching mode and she's had loads of work to mark, and maybe she's just lost a student aid or something, so she's doing it all herself. She's got very little time and effort to put in on our projects. And with me, sometimes it's just I haven't got it. Sorry, tank's empty. Don't ask me to do anything creative today. I'm running 2 games a week. That's it. I'm playing in one. Can't do anything more. But then there are other times when you've got loads for no apparent reason. So it depends entirely on the amount of energy in the room and availability, really.
Yeah, me being the layout person, I have defaulted to project management as well. So quite often, if I'm pushing something, it moves. And I don't think there's yet been a beer with teeth publication that I haven't been in on. And I'd like that to change. I look forward to it being different. So it would be a bit weird to say there is a process, because mostly what there is enthusiasm to move the next project forwards. My habit of being in layout is a bit of a blocker on that. And that's why we're hoping that other people will be learning it as well.
Yeah, and for example, that people do tend to. I'll be scribbling away notes in the background, but until we start talking about layout and editing, it doesn't become real, if you know what I mean. I'll have a bunch of sprawling notes on paper or on a book somewhere, or in a notepad file. But until we actually start doing the nuts and bolts of getting it into a layout, then it doesn't really start being real.
So this has been a bit of a contentious question with some of the other podcasts that we've had. So what's your favorite JC project that you weren't involved in and that you would have liked to have been?
This is actually a bit awkward for me because I do a lot of the art direction with Chris. Even when Chris is doing art, I help, be her handler. Alien Wildebeest problem again. So I've seen a lot of things. I know that she really loves the Rough Guide to Glamour because it recalibrated her sense of what the community title could be. Like, it came out and it was just wow. And I quite like that as well. But I think I'm kind of involved in it, but I didn't do any of the work, as it were. I think for me it's Sandheart. I went from, I don't know anything about that place, why should I get it, to this is one of the best adventures I've seen. And this is actually 3 of the best adventures I've seen. And I'm kind of half spoiled on them because I know all of the arts directions, so I know the secrets. And I'm hoping someone else will run them for me first, but I'm also hoping that I get to run them soon. So I just love it as a big, beautiful thing that comes together well. And especially in Volume 3, it does something, I'm not going to spoiler it, but it does something that I have never seen done in a particular way. And it does it really, really well. And I looked at this new mechanic and I went, I like that a lot. And that leveled me up as a GM. So for me, it's probably Sandheart Volume 3, despite being so close to it.
Damn it, I want to play it now. Okay, for me, it's actually, again, a tricky question, not because of my involvement, because I haven't actually read a lot. I bought quite a lot, but because Bera and Tom, who are the 2 of the 3 people I play with, as in GM for me, have bought a lot of this, and I've given them the space because I've got a lot of the old classic stuff that I'm going to recycle or I'm going to write my own. So I actually, although I bought quite a bit, I haven't actually read a lot because I don't want to spoil myself. And honestly, this is not me being a creep, but the favorite thing I've read is Legion. Because
I will cut that.
Yeah, because I love I do like, and it's often how I write, is I write a bunch of non-player characters and their motivations and the people with them and their teams, and then I kind of maybe throw a few plot hooks at it, and then I just wing it as I go. That's very much how I GM, and therefore I really like Legion. But in defense of all the other products, I haven't read a lot of them because I'm expecting to play them. So a lot of them look really, really good.
Yeah, no, it's ditto as well. And thanks for that, Stella. Whew, as you said. I'm literally just starting a new campaign now. And the plan was to kick it off with Sandheart. But of course, players have different ideas and it doesn't quite fit. But I'm hoping to run the Pairing Stones combined with Austin Conrad's The Troop of Terror as wedding entertainers. I'm hoping that totally goes to shit and they end up being put into the Sun County Militia. But don't tell anybody. We'll see how we go.
I did that out of the transcript.
So did you mentioned the Weavers Quarter of Clear Wine. Did you have anything else in the pipeline you can tell us about? Or is that taking up all your energy at the moment?
Oh, that one's a pipe dream.
Right.
Currently, I am doing the layout for something that Tom wrote. So its working title is Red Earth Tower. It's got a part set in Sarta and then a part set in Israelia. Rajar knows it. He's played it through. I don't want to spoiler it too much, but there is an ironclad bastard in there, and he is one of our favourite NPCs because, it's that little bastard again!
Yes.
I love
yeah,
those.
there's a recurring bad guy non-player character who's been far too clever, and my Stormball missed beheading him because of divine intervention, and really wants to kill him. Yeah, no, really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I've got something that I wrote and ran. Barrett and the other group, and Tom's also in that one. As is Chris, as is Erin actually, and my wife. Run through, and that's working title The Iron Pig, which is
I have a theme of sharpened pigs, and I am not
Sharpened
sorry. And I
pigs,
didn't
yeah.
do this one,
which
but I
is
will do free artwork of a sharpened pig for Rajar.
yes. No, this one's about a Tusk Rider warband, which I'd like to write up, and then tip of the hat could be just used wherever you want to have a Tusk Rider warband because they're pretty mobile. So yeah, I'm writing that up, and I've got a whole bunch of particularly nasty Tusk Riders led by a female Rune Lord, which I think would be quite amusing to spring on people, and they certainly made life particularly difficult for my players back in the day.
Chris and I are also spitballing a sequel to Stone and Bone. We have an idea of how a trilogy arc will go. We need to find time for Chris, writing time that I'm not using for layout for me. And when I procrastinate in doing layout, I tend to do art. So I could push that one faster, but I think Chris doesn't really have the energy right now. I'm also working on something with Erin, which I'm not going to spoiler at all. We've got basic plot, we've got a basic understanding of how things happen, and I'm going to throw Rajar and Chris and all the other characters into it at some point. So I'm not even going to hint at that, but there is, we've got a thing that we could probably play with a couple of days' notice already. Then hopefully I'll get Erin to do a load of the layout for that.
Awesome. And finally, our last question. So, to which runes or deity would you commit yourself today?
I wouldn't. I mean, people who think that they have an 80% in truth are lying to themselves.
Yeah. For me, I wouldn't commit myself to any runes, deity-wise. I wouldn't claim that I'm a shaman, but I tend that way, and I walk up the riverbank every morning, often with my cat in tow, and say hi to the river goddess. So I'm a shaman of the local rivers spirit cult. If you want to extend it, I'm not. I wouldn't claim to be a shaman or anything, but that's the way I roll.
Chris does point herself out as being an Earth and Harmony person. If I had to say I had 60% in runes, it would be truth, stabbing people, and putting my feet up on the table while I'm talking to the boss. So probably disorder for me. Yeah, and maybe movement. But no, none of those things are really me. They're all things that I adopt when I go into a world I love, and then I come out and I'm someone else.
So death and movement combined in very sharp motions.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks both of you for joining me today. It's been a fantastic. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And I'm looking forward to talking to you both again in the future.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So it's been a blast.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening to Tales from the Black Alynx. If you enjoyed the podcast, we'd love it if you were able to leave a review or rating on iTunes or your podcast software of choice. Or if you really liked it, you can support us via Patreon. You can contact us with questions and interview requests via our Facebook page, facebook.com/groups/the RuneQuest Project, or email us at therunequestproject@gmail.com.